Wow, welcome Interop. Welcome to the Network Automation Summit. That was a crazy world we live in right now, from everything going on in the world to taking a conference fully digital, fully online. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to skip some of the short intro pieces that I had planned, and we're going to try to get this introduction within about 30 minutes. So to jump right in, we saw in the previous slide that this is presented by Network to Code. So we'll start with providing just a short introduction to who we are if you haven't heard of us. We're a consultancy that's about 6.5 years old. Our sole focus is really understanding client requirements and building solutions around improving network management and operations. If there was one phrase or one sentence to say what we do, it's that we bridge the gap between DevOps, software development, and networking. In fact, we have close to a dozen CCIEs or expert level certs on staff of people that have fully converted to being experts in this space of automation, software development, and so on. So as a company, our focus is really about transforming how networks are not only operated, but really architected, engineered, deployed, and operated going forward. Okay, and this is the second summit that we're co-hosting with Interop. The first one was last year. I'm glad to be back, and please, if you're attending, feel free, and please, make sure you rate and provide feedback all the presentations, because we think it'd be great to come back again for the years to come. And a little more hiccups. Okay, so who am I? Well, I'm super humbled to be here and super humbled every day getting to work with a team of experts in this space. And I've spent most of my days working with clients and internally, really, again, understanding customer requirements and creating services and solutions that's going to really help improve overall network management and operations through network automation solutions. So we're going to cover two main things in this talk. One, I'm calling the state of network automation. And there, we're going to cover common themes that we're seeing in the industry. Then we're going to spend a few minutes towards the end introducing the overall program that we have in store over the next 2 days. If we look at open source, we see there's a continued rise of open source. Now, open source isn't new. In fact, it's been used predominantly over the past couple decades in systems and applications. And the past 10 plus years, we've seen the emergence of call it DevOps proper, with tools like Chef, Puppet, Ansible, Salt, and so on. But there's a continued open source movement that's happening in the networking domain. So we have to ask ourselves, why? Why does that continue to happen, let's say, across IT, but specifically now within the context of the networking domain? There's a few reasons that are out there, several reasons, and we're going to cover a few of them in this slide. First, it's about gaining control. It's about gaining control and or taking control back, right? We've had things like the command line interface or the CLI for decades. We now have UIs on next-gen fabrics and controllers, but it's about gaining control of that and having the ability to extend platforms to do exactly what you need it to do. What I mean is, if we look at platforms today and look at even a basic network that has 1 or 2 or 3 vendors, different hardware types, and dozens or hundreds of features on those platforms, what safeguards do you have in place that your tool chain doesn't have to change if there's a new feature on the device, or at some point you want to migrate from device A to device B, or from vendor A to vendor B? So gaining control and having platforms that are extensible is again 2 reasons so far that we see that continue to rise in open source. It's about workflows. The open source communities that exist are usually closer to the workflows that consume those tools, because we have developers and engineers that are building open source, and so they more innately understand the use cases that are being built, and there's not a hierarchy or product teams that shield requirements. They're more natively involved into the day-to-day workflows of the users of those platforms and tools. Easy access to start. This has truly been super critical for the industry in the past couple of years. You can literally install software with a single command. You could, for one, you can do a git clone, you can do a yum install, you can do a pip install, apt install. You can get software in a matter of minutes to start doing something. Now, I'll be the first to admit, it might not be that what you can download in minutes is what you should use in production, but it's really changing the game and changing the thought process of the overall consumption models of software going forward in the networking domain. There's thriving communities. These communities offer collaboration and sharing. This makes it more personal to be able to collaborate across companies and organizations to solve the same problems. It's not always about costs. Maybe it is, maybe it's not sometimes, but it's not always about costs. And it's not about open source versus commercial platforms. Now, the truth is, this is going to be a great panel we have in store tomorrow afternoon. The panel is actually called Open Source versus Commercial Platforms, but it's actually not about that. As we're going to see, it's about extensibility. Platforms that you buy may very well have that. It may very well have downloads that are available. But really, when we think about it, we have to keep that in mind as we progress forward over the next 2 days, that it's not just about open source versus commercial. I'll prove it. What do I mean by that, actually? That it's not just about comparing and contrasting where the software comes from. Well, the truth is, let's look at over the last 12, 24, 36 months, there's been a lot of integrations and a lot of articles published that are aimed at how do we create and integrate solutions that get consumed easily. Let's look at Arista to start with. We have Terraform integrations. We have webinars with Arista and Netbox. We also have articles getting written about building pipelines, GitOps pipelines, leveraging Ansible, Robot Framework, and Batfish. Batfish, one of the sponsors, or IntentionNet of this week as well. We have integrations with Salt and EOS. Now, as we go through this slide, as it builds, just keep in the back of your mind about creating solutions. Less about products, more about solutions. Same is true with Cisco. Let's look, Cisco NSO, great platform, integration with Ansible. We have two of the latest and greatest tech stacks from Cisco, with Cisco ACI and DNA Center, right? The data center and the campus environments. And we have plugins here, integrations with Ansible and Vault. How common is it for manufacturers to talk about how you handle credentials? Where do those credentials go? You're using their API, tokens. Where do you put them? How do you securely get them out? We got Terraform support for ACI. We have Salt integrations, Python integrations. The list goes on because it's all about how to have these worlds come together to create solutions. We have Juniper. We have Juniper with Terraform, with Salt, with Ansible. Same as for Cumulus, right? So you see a lot of the common themes here. We also have IntentionNet, who sponsors the Batfish project, and Itential, both summit sponsors for the next couple of days, showcasing Ansible integrations. Now again, these integrations are only a subset of what all these companies offer anyway. We also have IP Fabric and Glueware, both on a panel tomorrow as well, with Itential and IntentionNet. All right, so we're seeing a lot of these, what are commercial companies have plugins and integrations to open source projects and tooling to create solutions. So perhaps partnerships and integrations are key. Maybe based on where you sit, maybe the handshake is on a 10-foot pole. I don't know. But really, to be able to deploy solutions into production, there's going to be integrations and partnerships that have to happen. Otherwise, it's still a lot of heavy lifting to deploy and integrate these solutions. As we go down this path, we're talking about holistic solutions, and we're going to start with commercial platforms on the left. Now, we're going to put a different spin on it as we go through this slide and take a look at oftentimes go-to-market strategy, and if there's a product-centric focus from manufacturers, meaning if you walk into a meeting, could be a sales meeting, it very well might be a product. These are the features. This is what it can do. And so there's actually more work on on us and you to figure out how it could help. And this oftentimes is a top-down sales approach. So we can contrast this with open source projects. Open source projects are unique, as I was alluding to already, that there's a operations and a workflow first focus. And it's because of the ops and DevOps, right? We have developers and operations. Operations are the ones that are going through workflows, provisioning, decommissioning, adding, migrating. All of these tasks that happen, right, are sometimes more understood by the project themselves because they're all one and the same based on the community, sometimes. But it might lead to a bottoms up sales approach. So different approaches. Now it just means there might be a little more work to understand the workflow that can be integrated, right, from a manufacturer, but both are totally valid to solve these problems. In fact, they're all required. At the top, we have integration points. We have platforms like ITSM platforms like ServiceNow and BMC. We could throw Jira up here as well. We have chat programs, really insinuating chat ops. We're going to have a chat ops talk tomorrow as well. But it could be Slack, Microsoft Teams, WebEx Teams, doesn't matter. But up top, this could be any IT integration, okay? Now, the truth is that these integrations have to be considered at some point early on in the life cycle of building network automation solutions. You have to consider, who are they getting built for? Is it network operations, engineering, architecture? Or is it truly for other teams that exist? Do you need self-service portals? Are you okay using a Git-centric pipeline, open a pull request, or the skill sets there? A lot of variables to evaluate to really build the solution that's required for a given environment. That brings us to the center. There's a lot of work, a lot of integration, and a lot of building that has to happen to just really even think through and ultimately deploy into production a solution that considers commercial, open source, and how they get integrated at the top and how they're consumed. And so I will give a shameless self-plug, because this is where we spend our time in Network to Code, right? This is what we do day to day. It's understanding the tools that exist. It could be to write plugins, it could be to build, it could be to integrate, but there's a lot of hard work that goes into this. And really, kudos to my team out there, because they're doing a stellar job every day. If one thing is fact right now, we can see that one tool can't do it all. Now, there's no doubt it's possible to create an RFP for a product, right? To say, well, we need that one tool. But the truth is, even the previous slides are showcasing that one tool can't do it all if you're thinking about how to solve workflow challenges. What does that mean? So we're going to look at workflows in the context of cloud. On this screen, we have the three major cloud providers. We have Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. There's a lot of talk right now about cloud first or cloud native, right? Should we deploy on-prem or in a colo in the cloud? Now, oftentimes, if you're in these portals, even from a network perspective, it could be even worse. Right? If you're trying to manage route tables or whatever it might be, or connecting virtual private networks together on-prem or in the cloud, there's a lot of clicking around in the UI if you're not leveraging certain tooling under the covers. And so the main point is, natively, cloud doesn't solve workflow challenges. For that matter, definitely on-prem networks, right? Or even in the cloud networks, because like I'm alluding to, you have to really have that mind map of how all these things work together. So there's a gap here that comes to light when we think about workflows. So what do we need? We need that automation first mindset. We need that mindset of automation first to think about any system, any network, anywhere, managed with an automation first approach. This means, if we look back at the previous slides and we hear about Terraform and Vault and Ansible and Salt and platforms like that, there's reasons why they've existed, or they do exist. There's reasons why a lot of those platforms primarily initially built for cloud infrastructure. We look at managing Amazon and Google and cloud and large Linux environments and not cloud environments. And so it's those same integrations now that we're seeing emerge within the networking space. So keep that in mind. It's about really thinking automation first, and then independent of where the resource is, to manage it in a uniform way, in a uniform approach. So if we dive into workflows a bit here and consider very basic workflows. In fact, you can usually sometimes write a workflow in 4 words, half a sentence or a phrase. And this could be assigning an IP address to an interface. It could be bouncing a port. It could be turning up or decommissioning a peer. Verbally, it sounds really, really easy. Like that's part of the problem, right? Like there's the perception these things are easy to solve with automation. But if we dive into these, what we're going to see is the workflow expands quite rapidly. Is there a need to open a change request? Is there a need to keep that change request up to date at any point during the change? Do you need to generate a command set to roll back or have a rollback plan that's multi-device? Basically, if a change fails, what do you then do across your fleet of infrastructure? Do you do backups before the change, after the change? Do you show commands before or after? Which show commands do you run? Again, are you going back to update the team via email or chat? How is this done today? And so as you think about these, for one, it's scratching the surface, right? There's really so much that go into even a basic change. But as we think about this, what about the data, right? Think about, how do you know which IP address to assign? How did you know it was that ASN for that BGP peer you were going to turn up, or the VLAN ID? Even the command set, something so basic. Well, yeah, I'm going to issue some show commands before and after the change. Well, what commands were you supposed to issue, or what command should you issue? And where's all that data stored? This is where we hear about source of truth. Right now, it is so important to think about data and source of truth, the desired state of the network. This is the desired state of the configuration of the network, the even desired state of the operations of the network. How many neighbors should there be on a given interface? These are the things you have to start thinking about decoupled from a device. These are things that exist now that nobody knows without going to the device and issuing a show command. Think about workflows and data, workflows and source of truth. Honestly, these are the keys to success, right? With network automation today, these are still gaps because it's still very much in conversation tool-centric. But keep this in the back of your mind as we progress forward over the next 2 days, because workflows and data, these are the keys to success within network automation. As we progress forward in this presentation and bring up architecture, the first point is still true, as I just alluded to. Workflows and data, they're paramount. You have to know them and document them. What's the workflow? Write every step down on paper. What are the data sources? Or what data is required to generate configuration? And where's the data coming from? So architecture should be considered, but it must be considered. If not, what happens is you end up having tools, you can do something really, really well today, but if you don't design for change or design for a broader use case, you're going to very much end up with tool sprawl, which already exists in network management. We don't want to keep down that approach, right? We want to really think holistically about the architecture and be able to understand the workflows and the data and the architecture, and then map the tools in to their use cases. So what I'm going to do is walk through a few slides around architecture and what this means. All right, now as we go through these, keep in the mind, it could be commercial tools, could be open source, could be a combination of both. This is independent of all that. And this architecture is meant to showcase a closed loop system that offers continuous verification. Now, what we're seeing here is 5 main components, right? Very much simplified. We have the top right, actual state, fed by telemetry. I'm not referring to streaming telemetry, right? I would say we live in the real world. That could be show commands. It could be syslog, SNMP. Of course, it could be streaming telemetry. It could be netcom subscriptions, right? It doesn't matter how you get the data, but you need to understand the actual state, the real-time state of the network. Flip side is true too, right? Intended state. We have to be able to define that intended state. We'll talk more about that coming up as well. In the middle, we have orchestration. There needs to be orchestration to be able to maybe react and decide what's going to happen. Are we going to have integrations to northbound tools, IT systems? Are we going to feed southbound and run a job, execute a job? So very much early on in the journey, orchestration, execution, and automation kind of might be one and the same, but down the road, they're more than likely separate, based on the scale of the project or initiative that happens. As we think about this architecture for network automation, look at the bottom tier here. We have network infrastructure. Another key point is to think through all the network towers that exist, right? It's very common when we think about next-gen technologies that we end up looking at these in silos, and we can't do that. We need to really think about this holistically, how we can have a platform and architecture that allows us to manage and consume wireless, LAN and WAN and DMZ security, SD-WAN, all of these uniformly. If we go through this, step one, no doubt, we have to be able to define the intent and define that somewhere. It could be a CMDB, it could be a database, it could be structured data files like JSON or YAML files. Right? Again, architecturally, you have to understand what needs to happen and then figure out where that happens. Orchestration, I alluded to this. There needs to be integration points. It could be for alerting, notification, and IT systems. Right? Common ones, no doubt, are ticketing and chat. Network to code, to be quite honest, I would say majority of our clients are either exploring or deploying chat ops. So it's been phenomenal to see the simplification and consumption of network automation. Okay. If we layer in on top this life cycle of continuous verification and closed loop systems, we break down what really happens across this loop about collecting data, enriching the data, not just collecting it from the device, but being able to cross-reference other metadata you might want to enrich it with, then analyze it and verify it and decide, what do you want to do? Do you want to simply send an email or a chat alert? Do you want to remediate? It doesn't have to be auto remediation from day one, right? It's very much a slow getting started process. You might want to crawl first, right? Then walk, then run, and very much let's sprint. But it's a journey to be able to do that. There's a lot of components here. There's a lot of processes, right, to really deploy this. You have to consider, can you get visibility into every piece of product, of project, service, and have the right visibility either in dashboards, in UIs, APIs, to consider, is it a black box? Can you get access to some of the data? Really think about architecturally what data exists somewhere, and can you get access to it to maybe even visualize it and view it and consume it with other tools. If we look at architecture, I want to highlight one major point here, and that's, well, for one, starting bottoms up, is the bottom half here. We're going to hear more about an upcoming session. This morning, this afternoon, there's a session with Damien on our team to really dive into architecture. But I'm keeping it high level for now, but want to highlight the fact that there's the building blocks that are required to offer value. And I think it's very common we get caught up talking about the tools and technology of how to build the platform underneath. That really is all about the foundation to deliver value. So keep that in the back of your mind as well as we progress forward over the next 2 days. And ask yourselves, ask in chat, through Swapcard about questions to the presenters about value provided, back to the business. And we're going to spend a lot more time on this tomorrow in the panels at the end of the day as well, right? So this platform is what enables business value, right? It's like these tasks, the workflows and solutions, being able to deliver to other teams. That's truly business value. Okay. All right, cool. So we're going through this fairly quick to make up some time. But yeah, in closing, this session around covering the common themes that we're seeing in the marketplace comes back, I'll say twofold: workflows and data. First two bullets here. Have to understand them first. Have to understand them and document them. If they're not documented, it's going to make the network automation journey way more tedious and complex than it needs to be. Because then there'll be a lot more iteration in code or integrations or tools, and a lot more trial and error versus really understanding what you're trying to build and deliver value for. This automation first approach, as I alluded to, again, super key. Think about automation first, no matter if you're managing a cloud network, on-prem network security, firewall, even if it's an SDN controller, you have to think about how is it automated? Is it better to migrate from a CLI to a UI and a controller? For certain things, sure. But how is it repeatable? How does the same person make that same change going forward? Even now with Automation First, you think about where we are in the industry. We have companies like Cisco. We have Juniper, I think Arista announcing certifications and tests for evangelizing this approach about bridging that gap between the open source tools with how they can be helped to automate equipment from them. And platform over power tools. Again, this is super key to understand. If you're on a team of 3 or a team of 10, doesn't matter. If each person is writing 1 or 2 or 3 scripts, you can very quickly end up with 30 to 50 ad hoc disparate scripts to manage a pocket of the network. We can't have that. You have to think about it, platform first, architecture first, and how do you really build that vision and architecture such that people use that to automate their task or their workflow. That goes hand in hand with time to value, right? Really understanding how much time it'll take to deliver value. And if it's 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, doesn't matter. But the key part here is to understand about delivering value and understanding that sometimes the platform itself is not as valuable as what the platform is delivering back to the business. All right, so I'm going to take, I think I have about three or 4 more minutes. I'm going to go through the quick program overview. And so that's the first talk was about the state of network automation, trying to make up time here and really introduce the day, or the next 2 days, I should say. And day 1 program, we've started this. We're now a little bit behind schedule, but we're going to go straight in and hear from Jaime at Riot and hear about how the Riot Direct Backbone is being automated to deliver operational efficiencies. And we're going to hear from Damien and Ken talking about architecture and why the tools question is the wrong question to be asked. And we're going to break apart for the day into 2 tracks. We have 2 great tracks, a lot of talks. Now, if you're new to a certain technology or tool or workflow, attend track 1. Now, I don't want to call the beginner track by any means. There's a lot of advanced technology being covered there. But if you've never seen CI/CD for networking, go see Josh. It's going to be a great session. If you haven't seen these libraries like NetMiko and Napalm, go see Kirk. These are going to be great sessions. Now, track 2, we're going to start hearing from people who are deploying into production, right? What is happening in organizations to be able to adopt these technologies and create solutions to get them to production. End of day, we're going to come back together for none other than the infamous Hank Preston from Cisco DevNet. Going to be a great session. I know I was up early this morning, up all weekends. I was trying to prep for this. I'm super pumped, and fingers crossed that I can win some points here. But this is a Zoom session, so you should see that in the agenda when you're in the platform and SwapCard. But this is a Zoom session, so everything else today you'll be able to connect in and bounce around a bit. But Hank's session at the end of the day, the game show, is in fact a Zoom session. Day 2, we come back even stronger than day 1. We're kicking the day off with Brian Culver on our team. This is going to be a great session, starting to discuss people and process. What's the impact of that with network automation? We'll hear about big data, ML, the impact there on network operations. Then we're going to go back into both tracks and hear a lot about data. I think we have about 5 or 6 sessions all about data and source of truth. Really some advanced talks that we're going to see tomorrow, and including automated testing, another big theme for tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to be closing with 2 amazing panels. I can't stress this enough. Now, we have a panel on open source versus commercial. Right, started to give that a little bit of a commercial, no pun intended earlier. But we have none other than Terry Slattery, who's going to be able to moderate some great panelists from IntentionNet, Glueware, Red Hat, and IP Fabric. And then we have a panel to close the day to really discuss enterprise transformation with network automation. This is going to be awesome. Troy on our team is going to moderate it. But we have Ariel from FedEx, Jay from Fiserv, and Matt from Marsh to be able to take part in this and really help showcase and talk through what they're seeing in their organizations and what they've done to really enable others to start adopting a different mindset with respect to network automation. A big thank you before we depart, Diane on our team. She's been killing it, coordinating, managing this whole process on our side, putting up with me. Yeah, that's for sure. It's probably never easy. Interop team, speakers, sponsors, all the attendees. I want to chat. Feel free to find me on SwapCard, Twitter, LinkedIn. Doesn't really matter. We'll have to hear about network automation and projects and what you're working on. I don't have time to show the agenda at the bottom, but I will say that if you want to attend the full summit, there's about 9 or 10 sessions you have to add. As an example, each panel tomorrow is its own session. The game show is decoupled as a session. And then we have both tracks as individual sessions throughout the day as well. So just make sure you have about 9 or 10 sessions. And so just comb through the agenda on SwapCard to be able to add it to your agenda. That way it's easier to find at that proper time. Thank you and enjoy. And I'll be here all week, so feel free. Would love to hear more about what you're working on these days.